Oh, baby, it's game day. Looking forward to the showdown tonight. Canada, USA. Screw the politics. Put it all behind you. Let's have some fun and watch some hockey, shall we? It'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. But first, some great counter-programming that's been going on. We had the Heritage Minister, Pascal St.Onge, say, you know what? I think it's time that we enshrine CBC funding into some legislation moving forward. So, you know, the whole public broadcaster has been slanted and going and showing only really leaning more so towards one side of the story. Yeah, we're going to enshrine their funding into legislation. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? I know my partner Reg wants to see it. Shout out to him calling that out over a year ago at this point. I'll have to put that in there. We had that press conference today. Then on the other hand, you had Pierre Poilievre say, yeah, I'm still saying we're going to double down on the CBC getting their funding cut. Enough is enough. They need to stand on their own 2 feet. There's so much bloat. There's so much wasted spending. It's time they start using the money that they so-called have to pay for themselves and stop working off the backs of the Canadian people. One argument is we need public funded media. The other says you got to do it on your own. Two contrasting points of view, and we'll highlight both sides of it on this one, and we'll let you at home make the decision of what is best. But first, I know I got some people rattled a little earlier in my previous video when I was going off about the Ruby Dallas stuff. People said, yeah, you're too loud. My hearing aid's hurting. It's a little much. And I understand. So it can be a little abrasive at times. I understand. So here's the thing. There's this amazing engineering feat that humans came up with not too long ago. It happens to be built with steel, aluminum in some cases, concrete, screws, asphalt, you know. It's this thing that they call a bridge. And I suggest you build one and get over it because your boy ain't changing. Let's go. Let's dig into the story, shall we? As I said, we're going to compare and contrast St.Onge and her take of what needs to happen and some significant changes to CBC's funding compared to what Poilievre is saying about it. Listen to her right here.
It does not belong to the Liberals. It does not belong to the Conservatives, and it does not belong to any other political parties. It belongs to the Canadian people. And this is why, to be able to give CBC Radio-Canada the means to fulfill its mandate, I propose that it be financed directly in the legislation instead of in the budget through statutory appropriation.
What? Yo. So instead of it being in the budget, we want to make sure there's legislation so it cannot move. It can't be taken away from them. We want to make sure that they have more funding and that it can't be touched by any government at any point in time because they are a service of the people, caring for what we want and what we want to know. This is the desire. This is what Canada needs. Even though, I don't know, aren't you guys in an alleged spat with one of your anchors who was upset you guys weren't doing balanced reporting and then he went separate ways with CBC? Didn't that happen at some point? Yeah. Balanced reporting, right? Yeah, that's what you guys do. Fascinating. And St.Onge in her report says that CBC and Radio-Canada needs long-term predictable funding. Canada invests less in its national public broadcaster than many other countries, including the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Japan. With rising concerns about online information integrity and newsroom closures across Canada, predictable funding would allow CBC and Radio-Canada to reach Canadians in their communities as well as innovate and collaborate, which would benefit the entire media ecosystem, including the party I'm a part of, which is the Liberals, who has benefited from very beneficial coverage coming from the CBC. But yeah, has nothing to do with the government though. Has nothing to do with the government. And in this address, she mentions how the comparison between, again, these countries of how much they spent on their public broadcasters versus how much the United States funds their public broadcasters. And we're a lot closer to the United States than we are to these other countries. And she mentioned that we don't want to use them as our barometer of how much we should spend on public broadcasting. Again, these Liberals still want to keep poking the bear, keep giving America a hard time, while expanding their ridiculous policies and trying to change and manipulate the narrative that is being spoken about in our country. So you take that piece, you take what she says, and then we kind of shift to Pierre Poilievre today, talking about and addressing the CBC as well. Which one do you identify most with?
We have to cut waste and mismanagement in this country. After 10 years of the Carney-Trudeau Liberals, They've increased government spending by 80%. They've increased the debt by over 100%. And much of it has gone to waste. For example, almost nobody watches CBC television. They have among the worst ratings of any network. And yet Trudeau gives them billions more. We're going to cut wasteful spending, not just there, but across the government to bring down inflation, deficits, and taxes. That's common sense. Now let's bring it home.
We're going to cut bloat and cut excess spending so that we can get it back in target of inflation, get control of our dollar again, make sure people have control of their paychecks again and how much they're making. That's the goal. That's what we want to see. Instead, you got the Liberals saying, no, we need to actually increase funding and make sure that the CBC always has their money because it is put into a bill that is passed into law within this country. Very different perspectives on how to handle our national broadcaster. Which one do you agree with? Which one would you like? We know the left loves the CBC and sees that there's no issue with the CBC because they benefit from the way that they report on events. They claim to be balanced. They claim to be down the middle. They claim to be covering all aspects of the story, which is not really the case. At least not in recent years. It's actually gotten pretty partisan over there at the CBC, and that's why people are upset with them. And that's why their views have dropped significantly. And shows like ours, views have increased exponentially. People are starving for just honest reporting, and we're here for it. We will never, ever claim that we are bipartisan. I'm pretty clear with how I stand on things. But the reality is, and the difference is, I don't try to mask it. I don't try to hide behind, oh, we're bipartisan here. We're right down the middle. I'll never say that. I'll never, ever admit that because it's not true. I lean a specific way. However, I try to at least be fair, and that is the difference. And that is the issue that Canadians have, is just tell us where you stand so that we know what lens we should be viewing your content in. Fairly clear. But then there was like one last piece of St.Onge's address where she addresses the tech oligarchs, the tech bros she likes to go on about. And this is, again, more fear-mongering from the Liberals about who runs the media.
You say that Pierre Poilievre's opinions don't represent the majority of Canadians, but if he wins a majority government, I think that statement might be tested. So how is this plan worth more than the paper that it's written on if you can't enshrine it, there's no parliament, and there's no way to actually get this through?
Well, this is why it's so important for me to complete my mandate letter by proposing this very clear plan for the future of the CBC, because it's now or never the time for any person who wants to be the next prime minister to commit to making sure that we have a viable public broadcaster for the next century. And there's going to be a leaders' debate next week for who's going to be the next leader of the Liberal Party, who's going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. And I think it's important that we stop talking about defunding or funding CBC and we talk about a vision and a plan for the future of the CBC, what it could mean for Canadians, especially at a time where we know that our means of communications are controlled in most parts by tech billionaire oligarchs in the United States. More than ever, it's important for Canadians to be able to rely on their own sources of information made by and for Canadians. Radio-Canada, CBC has been there for the past 100 years through conservative and liberal governments. It is more relevant than ever in the current context to have and to be able to rely on a public service media. And to not understand that reality shows the lack of understanding of the global context that we're in. And it shows the lack of love for our own country and for the fact that we need to be able to tell our own stories in our own way. And Radio-Canada, CBC will never be controlled by Musk, Zuckerberg, or any other private billionaire tech oligarch.
She really thought she did something there, didn't she? The CBC will never be owned by Musk or Zuckerberg or any tech oligarch. Never. Okay. No one has suggested buying the CBC, but yet you want to put that fear out there for everybody to hear. Okay, got it. And so the idea that CBC needs to be saved, CBC needs to be funded, CBC needs to be taken care of because it's the Canadian people. That is their news network. Our media is all controlled by tech oligarchs. Dude, you weren't complaining at all about media and it being controlled by tech oligarchs prior to Musk purchasing Twitter. Never heard a dang thing out of you guys. Oh, do you know why? Because you benefited by the slant and the moderation of content on the platform up to that point. Then someone comes in and says, we're going to show all sides of the argument. We're not going to shadow ban. We're not going to lift up one side versus the other. We're going to allow everyone to talk. And sure, there's been conversations and debates about it since, but leave that for now. That is what has happened. It hasn't gone to the point of like, nope, we're just going to silence all the liberal voices. We're only going to elevate the conservative voices. That didn't happen. Then you turn around and say what you want about it, but you have Zuckerberg who's like, I didn't like how the Biden administration would pressure us to silence specific stories. And so now we're kind of happy that we're going to do our best to show both sides of the argument on our platform. That is what they've come back with. And that is a threat to the leftists, which we're seeing right here. Because people are seeing the other side of the argument, that is a threat to them. That should tell you everything you need to know about these individuals. The fact that platforms are allowing everyone to have a voice is a problem. That's why they want to save their CBC. It's because they can control the narrative. Like, oh, liberals don't touch it. Get it. Okay. No. Do you know who touches it? Do you know whoever funds the paycheck is the one who controls the media. That's how this works. Whether you like it or not, that's how it operates. And right now it is operated by a state and a party that has shown that they want absolute control at all times and will kick anybody out who doesn't play ball with them. It's pretty simple. So give me a break. Don't believe it. And this is how they are trying to shape the narrative. All the billionaires are just trying to ruin our democracy. Look, we can't allow them in. We have to make sure we fund the CBC. Again, all this fear mongering that continues to take place. It will backfire on them. I 100% believe it. I do truly believe that people will see through it. Social media is not a real place. Get out and talk to some real people and have a conversation with how they actually feel. Because again, this whole idea of enshrining funding for the CBC inside of legislation is crazy. I will say it again. It is incredibly unhinged. We want to give money to the same CBC that just paid out $18.4 million in bonuses to their executives this past year. We want to give money to them. Documents obtained through access to information laws show CBC Radio Canada paid bonuses to 1,194 employees for the 23-24 fiscal year. More than 3.3 million of that sum was paid to 45 executives. Ultimately, 141 employees were laid off and 205 vacant positions were eliminated at CBC Radio Canada because of all that funding they've been getting. Yes, we need to enshrine their money inside legislation. I'm sure we'd all love that, wouldn't we? This organization is completely and utterly corrupt. This is not the CBC of 1940. This is the CBC of 2025, one that's been seized and controlled by political money and is not a bipartisan entity anymore, if it ever was. Because again, it's the same CBC that has helped and a part of the greater media landscape that has now turned 27% of Canadians against their American neighbors. They have been the mouthpiece of the Trudeau government and pointing the finger at the wrong person and not pointing at the right issues that are happening in this country. And now 27% of Canadians view the United States as an enemy of our country. Yep. Let's enshrine their legislation. Yeah. No, thank you. Not a chance. Not going to happen. I'll fight that to the day I die. But that is the show. With all that in the backdrop and what's going on, I look forward to tonight. It will be interesting. Rematch of last Saturday, Canada, USA. We'll see what happens with the anthems tonight. It is completely and utterly in the Americans' right to boo our anthem because of the trash that was on display in Montreal last Saturday. But I also wouldn't be surprised if the script gets flipped, where Americans prove a point by cheering our national anthem. Regardless, screw the politics, screw what's going on. What I believe is one thing. The one thing that hasn't been hammered out of the hearts of Canadians is our heart and desire to win a game of hockey. I'm voting for our boys in red regardless. It's going to be a fun one. This is going to be great. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.